Welcome to Grounding Ascension, where we explore the process of activating and integrating our I Am presence. I am your host, Celeste Glus. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Grounding Ascension. Today, we get to talk about reclaiming the true sexual force, what it actually is, where we are as a collective with sexual force and sexual energy, what it looks like when it's distorted, and how it can actually show up in your body and in your life. So before we begin this conversation, I want us to actually just take a breath together, because I know that this can be a bit triggering and can awaken certain emotions, certain belief systems, certain things that are stored in our cells and in our bodies. So before we even begin this conversation, I want you to just take a really deep exhale. So pull your navel all the way towards your spine, exhale the air out of your body, and hold for a moment. And then just take a long, soothing inhale. Just fill up all the way, heart, belly, chest, mind, spirit. And take a nice cleansing exhale. So I'd like to begin by stating that the following conversation is a perspective from which I've picked up with working with the rose, walking the rose path, taking on the teachings of the divine feminine, the work that I do, and the energy that I come across. Like much of my work, this is a conversation about reawakening something that's already inside of you. There's a wisdom, there is a frequency that is unique to you that wants to be expressed. And this conversation is about allowing ourselves to explore that. I don't have the final answer to anything that I ever talk about, and most specifically, something so sacred and yet so distorted as the sexual energy. So we as a collective have been deeply blinded and misled about what true sexual energy is. Most specifically at this time that we are experiencing a massive global collective awakening, and with the rise of things like Tantra and so many other schools of thought around the sexual force, this topic and this subject is in one way very taboo, and then in another way being exploited. And I would like us, and I invite us to walk the lines in between. I don't believe in having any subjects to be taboo, because that is just a repressed part of our self. And yet anything that goes out into the global masses, anything that is made into an industry and sold, has within it inherently a part of it that is lost, a wisdom that cannot be held sacred, a part of the information that is distorted and then fed to the masses. So this conversation is going to be walking that fine line in between all of that and inviting you to perhaps discover or see the sexual force in a new way in your life. So the fact that you are actually listening to this episode tells me that there is a part of you that already knows, you already understand that sex is highly misunderstood in our modern day culture. And one of the things that I've noticed is that when we seek to understand something, when we look for information, we become blind in that seeking. So this is not about me telling you what the true sexual force is, right? This is why I call this reclaiming the true sexual force. This is allowing the sexual force to unfold within you the way that it was originally meant to unfold within you. before you received any programming, before somebody told you what sex looks and feels like, before we received any kind of information around how we should be expressing our sexual force and our sexual energy. So, the work of reclaiming our true sexual force is one that reestablishes our energy centers. It fuels our life, it fuels our body, it fuels our spirit in a healthy, balanced, and sustainable way. This is the work that sparks the fertile soil that we spoke about in previous episodes, right? It cannot be given to you by someone. I can't tell you something and all of a sudden it's reawakened and reclaimed within you. Somebody outside of you cannot give you an experience or something that will automatically reclaim your true sexual force. This is a journey. This is a path that has to unfold within you. I believe that sex is uniquely expressed by every human on this planet. And I also believe that every person, every human on this planet, at some point or another, will have to take this journey back to themselves. You'll have to walk this path and figure out what sex looks like and feels like outside of what you've been told, without having to depend on someone or something outside of you to tell you, right? And I think it's a beautiful thing that so many schools of Tantra and so many beautiful practitioners are now making themselves available, and they are so easily and readily available to so many of us. And yet, it's so important to have part of this journey to be unique and for you to know the power that exists already inside of you so that you don't fall into that seeking forever mentality that often happens, right? So, what is the true sexual force? Well, sex is life force, and that's where we have to begin our conversation, right? The merging of two forces into the creation of something, right? That in between moment, that is sex as life force. Life force is in everything, is in every single living, conscious, breathing entity, right? Anything that has intelligent life force has the true sexual force. It's the spark of life, right? When opposing forces meet, the yin and the yang, the feminine and the masculine, they have a moment of merging into creation. And so that in-between place, that is life force. That is sex, as we could define it, right? The explosion point is the sex force, is the life force. It holds within it electricity, magnetism, buoyancy, energy. And we have lost this spark of life. We have lost this life force by putting what we call sex into a box and also being told that we are not the creators of our life. We have been made to believe that sex is simply two humans coming together and vigorously creating some kind of friction for the purpose of XYZ, right? For the purpose of procreation, for the purpose of physical, sensual stimulation, right? And that's it. That's the ultimate defining box we put sex into. So, are you starting to see how this could simply strip away the vast potential that the sexual force could be witnessed as and experienced as, right? I mean, we've literally put it inside a tiny 2x2 box. and decided to go along with the idea that it's just purely physical. It's purely sensually appetizing, right? And outside of that, it can or cannot be used to create another human being. And that's it. That's the ending definition of sex in our matrix, right? Physically stimulating pleasure for a limited amount of time with or without a child to create. So why can't people get enough of sex? Why is it one of the most sought after experiences in our world? Why is it so repressed? Why is that people don't feel fulfilled, and why they keep seeking sex in other places, in other things, in other experiences, right? Why is it that people are left unsatiated and resort to hiding behind so many other addictive patterns? Well, I think it's pretty obvious at this point, right? The definition and what we've been told sex to be is so limiting that we can't possibly ever feel satisfied and satiated by this layman's way of receiving the sexual force in our life, right? What if I told you that you were only allowed to eat whatever food you wanted every day from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. And that's it. Those are the only time blocks that you're allowed to eat ever in your life. So that's your time block forever. You're limited to 1 hour, 60 minutes every day. It's always going to be the same time. And you can choose what you want to eat, but it's only for those 60 minutes. You would probably spend the remainder of your living moments thinking about what those 60 minutes will be like, right? You will do the research. You will fill your reality with images, with sensations, with smells of the foods that you can possibly intake in just 60 minutes of your daily life, right? And you will actually find ways to probably extend that time further, right? You'll hide behind any means necessary to extend those 60 minutes to 61, to 65, to sneak in tiny bits of food into your life anywhere that you can, right? It's only normal when somebody is limited to something that can provide so much nourishment in their life, right? Same thing with sex, guys. If you are limited to, it's actually, you can look at it in the same exact terms. If we are limited to that tiny hour of sex compared to an entire day or lifespan, right? Of course, the subconscious and energetic body is going to be so thirsty for something more that it will literally eat up your body, your mind, your spirit. And here's the worst part of it all. Even for those people that actually believe, okay, this is sex, right? Okay, this 1 hour of your life that you get to eat, like this is the real thing. This is how life works. You have to fit into this box. And so there's a lot of good-hearted people believing that, right? And like, okay, this is all I got. This is what sex is supposed to be like. This is the box I've been given. This is the box I'm going to play in, right? Unfortunately, what happens is in the world of energy, energy is energy is energy. So anytime that you repress energy and you try to shove it into a tiny little definition or box, that energy has to move. It's a law of the universe. You cannot actually make that energy disappear. So then what happens, right? This is what we're going to talk about later in the episode when I will share what happens when the sexual force is distorted or repressed, how it actually looks and what it looks like in your life or in your body, okay? So where does this leave us in regards to sex as life force to become an actual creator of your life? A person living in their satisfied state, in a pleasurable and desirable, sexually pleased way, they're not lacking desire to be met. Meaning they're not looking for other places or things or people or circumstances or experiences to fulfill their sexual needs, right? So, what does that specifically mean? In one way, it means that they are balanced energetically and they are the creator, or better said, the co creator of their life experiences, because there is no energy, at least not an abundant amount of energy, that is being repressed and pushing against itself. Okay. Now, when I say co creator of their life experience, I'm not talking about manifesting, right? We'll be talking about manifesting in another episode because that's a whole nother distortion and manipulation of energy. But I'm talking about real creation, like truly creating for creation's sake. If you're really creating your life, you will find that you no longer seek to create, right? Just like I said earlier, if you really feel sexually satisfied, you won't be seeking external stimulation to satisfy that sexual force because there'll be nothing to fulfill, right? You'll already be fully satisfied. And why do I talk about creating your life? Well, the sexual force and being the creator of your life are completely connected, right? People that are not living the life that they want or desire or feel pleasure from, that is a huge indicator that something is off in your sexual force, something is off in your sexual energy, right? And this doesn't mean that you are fucked up sexually, right? It just means that there is some kind of repression or misunderstanding of what the sexual force can look like and expand into through your life. And we have forgotten that true creation, stick with me for this one, true creation, just like the true sexual force, we have forgotten that it actually happens through the heart. We've forgotten it. It's been completely eradicated from our society. So here we are trying to create and manifest on the physical level. Here we are trying to make sex be a completely physical thing. And meanwhile, the gateway is through the heart. The need for us as a humanity to open our hearts, to experience true love, true joy, true surrender, absolute bliss. This comes first and foremost from opening the heart. An open heart is the doorway to activating the true sexual force. An open heart is the doorway to becoming the co-creator of the life that you desire, that provides and meets your pleasures and needs and wants. And when I say true sexual force, I'm not just saying the physical orgasmic state, right? I think this has already been really clear. That's just one portion of the sexual experience, which seems to be, for many people, the whole thing, right? But that's what this podcast is about. It's about realizing that it's not what we've been told. It's so much more. If someone tells you this is sex, right? And they show you an image of two people doing their thing, and then you go on and you try to repeat that or replicate that, how much deprogramming do you think it's going to take for you to make your way back to not knowing what sex is and is supposed to look like and feel like and be experienced as? This is the work that I invite you to do and to get really, really curious about. I'm bringing forth the energetics of sex, not just the physicalization of sexual acts that we have been shown, to very different things. And this gets us to the topic of activating the Kundalini force, right? Activating the energy that runs up the spine from activating and awakening true sexual force, opening up the third eye, being able to hold a higher light quotient in our body. But most importantly, because there are people with activated Kundalinis that have not necessarily opened up the deeper parts of their heart, I bring you into the conversation of expanding deeper into new profound places of your heart. This is what we need to do more than anything as a humanity. And one of the easiest places to see what the natural orgasmic state looks like is a child. Think about it. Think about how blissful they are. They haven't yet been fed any information about sex, about what the orgasmic state is supposed to look like. They're just energetic. They're buoyant. They have so much life force within them. And they're just walking around with wide open hearts. They're not judging. They're not in fear, right? Now, it just depends, right? All children are different, and every child is programmed and, deeply entrenched in their environment. But if you get them young enough, you will see that they're orgasmic. You will see how blissful they are. And this state exists inside of our hearts. We just have to get back into it to then explore what the true sexual force can look like to us. So I have a few questions here that I want you to get curious about, and maybe you press pause and really just take some time, think about this, because this is going to basically give you a good insight, an idea about where you are with all of this. Okay, so the first question is, how was sex first introduced to you? How did you first experience what sex is or looks like or feels like? Do you feel you have a healthy relationship to sex? Do you see sex as purely physical? And if so, are you open to experiencing sex as a state of being that holds an energetic frequency in your body and in your life, as opposed to being something that's limited to a very specific time and space action? When we correct the sexual force in our life, it has tremendous ripple effects. I'm talking about quantum, guys. No lie. It ripples out into relationships. It affects our thoughts. It affects our behavioral patterns, our belief systems. It literally can affect the way that we eat, that we speak, that we think, that we move. It is so inherent in our lives that it is profound when you begin to come back to your true sexual force. Another really easy way to take an inventory is to simply take a look at the root and sacral chakras, what these energy centers mean, and what these parts of your life feel like to you, right? The foundation of your life, the security, how you feel supported, the way that you express yourself, how creative you are. All of these things have a direct correlation with how rooted you are in your true sexual force. So this brings us to the conversation of, where do we currently stand with the topic of sex? Well, you've already gotten a lot of insight in regards to that, right? But basically, it's been used as a weapon against us, right? Because if you can take somebody's life force and stick it into a 2x2 box and give it to them and tell them to live in that box, then yes, their reality is going to become quickly inverted. Their energy centers are going to be very off, and their ability to tap into and create a life that meets their desires and their pleasures and their needs and wants is not going to be clear or easy. There's going to be a lot of roadblocks in between, right? In between knowing what fills your desires and actually living that. There's going to be a lot of veils in between that. We think we want X, Y, and Z because we've been told that through the news, through the TV, through the programming, but that's not what we truly want. It's not. And when we realize that most of us, we just want to be truly loved. We want to be seen. We want to be held. We want to be acknowledged for the person that we are, not for the things that we accomplish or how much we acquire. And experiencing these things now in this day and age is very rare. So what happens when we're not loved or seen or held or truly acknowledged? Well, we seek those things through other means. And those means often use our true sexual force, the life force within us. They use that and become addictions to all the things our society is addicted to. Food, sex, TV, social media, name it, and it's an addiction these days, right? So then what happens when we actually disconnect from these programs? What happens every time we catch ourselves and we decide that we're not playing this game anymore? And not only do we decide that we're not playing this game anymore, we actually do something about it. Because many of us are aware of this stuff, but I think there needs to be more of us that are doing something about it. When we begin to unplug from the program and reclaim our true energy body, this gets us back to an open heart. We begin to restore the energetic component of what is fundamentally necessary to sustain and empower or strengthen what we would consider the Ka body. The Ka body is the sexual life force body, energetically speaking. And there's a direct connection between the heart and the Ka body that we as a humanity have lost and are now learning how to make our way back to it. And this process of coming back to it no longer needs us to be physically stimulated to the point of absolute burnout, right? And again, I'm talking about physically stimulated through these addictions that we've acquired because we've repressed our true sexual force, the true life force within us. And it's when this sexual force is repressed and not satisfied and not fully capable of expanding into its full potential, that's when we get stuck in the lower realms. That's when we become devoured by our own physical senses and we get stuck in what we would call the 3D, right? The pure physical reality of life, and we are stripped away from everything else. And many traditions call this the hell realms, right? The realms where it is purely physically stimulating and satiating, and yet nothing is ever enough. So I ask you, where in your life or in your experience of life do you find yourself in holes that are not able to be satisfied? Meaning no matter how much you get of that one thing, right? Because now we're talking about repressed sexual energy. What is it showing up as in your life? What is that thing that you simply cannot get enough of? And I invite you to get curious about how that is linked with the offset or the imbalance of your true sexual force. We've lost our ability to see life outside of this 2x2 box. But in the process of reigniting that and reawakening that, we begin to redefine what life can feel like, what the true sexual force can look like and appear like in our lives. And this path brings us back to sex as a way of life, right? The true practice of Tantra is life force, sexual force as a way of living. The ability to go outside and place your face underneath the sun and feel the warmth on your skin and vibrate from the inside out because of the bliss that you feel from that one moment. That, my friends, is the reawakening of the true sexual force. And by the way, this does not repress or limit the physical sexual experience, right? By all means, that is extremely important and beautiful and necessary. But this conversation is about going outside of that and figuring out why so much of our humanity is not able to feel satisfied and feel like their pleasures and their needs and desires are met. And not only that, why has it turned down into the lower forces? Why has the sexual energy turned into the darker force that runs the subconscious collective mind? That, my friends, is deep. And that's the work that we're doing right now. So important that we do this for those of us that are awakened and walking this path. And for those of you that have young people in your lives and you see, and many of you maybe are living yourself, that technology and social media and screens and the things that are portrayed through screens to us are pretty much completely 110% programming the definition of what sex looks like in our lives. And what that actually does is it puts us back in that 2x2 box. It makes that box 1x1, so it makes it way smaller. But guys, outside of that, it strips us away from the magic of life, from the heart of true hearts, from the sexual force, from the activation of the Ka body. This is why we feel so disconnected. This is why our humanity is running around wild and seeking validation, right? Because we can't figure out our most basic needs in regards to sex. Another way that distorted sexual energy can show up in your life is the inability to be raw and be real with certain parts of yourself. So when you're sitting and listening to this and you press pause, you automatically want to run away. So if that's one of those reactions that you get, or when you are in front of that thing that you are addicted to, whether it be food, sex, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, and you cannot be real and raw about the true relationship you have with that thing, that is a repressed sexual energetic force that needs to be looked at and worked through in your body. Because again, any kind of holdup, any kind of addiction, any kind of obsession energetically in our lives, anything we're holding back on or lying to ourselves about, has to be connected fundamentally with our sense of security and ability to feel safe in our way of being, in our way of expressing, in our way of showing up through our hearts. What I find often in my line of work is that there's a massive connection between our wanting as a humanity, as women and men, to control or to manipulate or to restrict X, Y, and Z, right? So many of us consider ourselves to be control freaks, or we are restricting ourselves through food or through technology. We are constantly restricting ourselves, or we are trying to manipulate certain factors in our lives. We're trying to manipulate our relationships, our children, our work standards, our, you name it. There's so much that we're either trying to manipulate, control, or restrict ourselves, that this obsession can be a massive sign of inverted or repressed sexual beliefs and patterns. And most often, what I see with women is our obsession around physical fitness, around working out, around food choices, around the way we look, around our relationships with our partner or our children. These are the most common things that we don't realize. We take out our obsessive, repressed sexual desires. Of course, we don't put it in that box, right? Because we can't see that. We don't see that at the forefront. All we see is we're just trying to control our meal sizes, or we're trying to control our workout routines, or we're trying to, have a better relationship with our partner. And meanwhile, these are repressed, manipulative approaches to hide behind distorted sexual beliefs and programs. And maybe that sounds like crazy far-fetched, right? These are the things that I talk about in the Woman Wisdom Mentorship, because it's deep, right? It's deep. I already feel like I've gone to a certain extent on a podcast that perhaps is not going to be receptive or understood to the level that I want it to, because it's a very constricted amount of time that I have to explain these things. But if you can open your eyes and your heart to seeing that if you were truly a child that was not in fear or repressed in the way that you could express yourself, in the way that you are accepted and loved by the most important people in your life, would you actually have this manipulation or control or restriction around these things that I'm talking about? Food, workouts, alcohol, sex, drugs, X, Y, and Z, social media, TV, right? Or would it just be a natural part of your life that you naturally know how to balance? And there is no need to restrict or repress or control or manipulate, right? These are actions coming from fear, from hiding, from not being able to be in our truth. And this is what I invite you to do when you explore your true sexual force. Can we come back to our natural way of being, to that part of us that is inherently loved and accepted and never in fear of being judged or controlled or manipulated? And understand that anytime that we fall into these distortions, anytime that we allow these repressed part of us to eat us up, or to basically subconsciously navigate our actions, thoughts, and words throughout the day, we are, in a sense, leaking our energy. And this is something that is a huge reason for why people, again, feel sexually unsatisfied and also are experiencing a lack of wanting to connect deeper in sexual intimacy. And this is why our younger generations, I believe, are really going to have to do a lot of work around this, because the amount of energy leakage that they are experiencing at such young ages through social media alone. I'm not even talking about TV or whatever it is that they're looking at on screens. I'm just simply talking about social media. What they are exposed to at such a young age, they are leaking so much energy that I see this as a massive obstacle that they're going to have to face and they're going to have to work through, unfortunately. But also fortunately, right? Because the deeper we go into the dark, the deeper we go into life's lessons, the higher we come out of them, right? So certain generations are given certain tests and certain very specific environmental and structural, let's say, forces to deal with and work through. And so this is just one of them. The sexual force is going to be one of those things that our younger generations, and when I say younger, I mean anyone about 25 years and younger, they're going to have to do some very heavy lifting because they've been exposed at such early ages to way too much visual and physical and sensual stimulation from the lower forces, right? I'm not talking about a child who grew up in a quote unquote healthy, grounded household, and that is not the appropriate way to explain it. But I am talking about the typical child who had a phone at a very young age and had access to Google. I didn't grow up with these things. The visual stimulation that is received from the subconscious, from the third eye, from the mind, from the spirit, from the energy body, at such a young age, it creates sort of wormholes energetically. And I'm gonna stop there because I'm going way too far into this in regards to younger generations. But just know that they have a big hurdle that they're gonna have to cross. So if you're a parent or if you're considering having a child, this is definitely work that you want to look into. So ultimately, let's start wrapping up this conversation because I think I could just continue on forever with you guys here. Ultimately, this conversation about reawakening and reactivating our true sexual force is a way to release ourselves from so many of societal burdens, of old belief systems that we've inherited that no longer help us. They no longer serve. And as we do this, we're going to liberate ourselves, and the profound states of love and ecstasy that you can open yourself to, again, not only physically with another person in a very specific situation, but I'm talking about living a life of true sexual force, living a life of bliss that awakens from the inside out. It's going to have you explore these opportunities. It's going to have you getting intimate with your own body's wisdom, with how you want to move and feel and sense, right? And I'm gonna wrap up on the part of senses because most specifically, I can say that me being a very sensitive kind of person, my senses get overwhelmed very, very quickly, right? So many empaths feel this, and I explain in many of my courses that this needs to be like a muscle. We need to be able to train our senses, whether you consider yourself an empath or not, right? And I do believe that most people on this planet are empaths. I think that if you're listening to this, you are some sort of an empath, and your senses need to destabilize in order to stabilize once again, because we have been so overstimulated in our society that the simple things that should create a sense of bliss and satisfaction and pleasure in our lives no longer do. The ability to sit outside, or the ability to have an amazing breakfast, right? It's not an Instagram post, guys. There's no pleasure in creating an Instagram post about your breakfast. You lose the pleasure and satisfaction of that moment when it becomes a post, okay? And this is not going against, that act in itself, because I'm guilty of doing that, of course. But there are moments in time when you can become fully present, and when you can stop leaking energy and allow that energy to come back into you, right? To circulate that energy through your body instead of pouring it out into the masses of the technological abyss, then we begin to reawaken and reignite our true sexual force. But this can only happen from the inside out. You then begin to live and to create a life that nourishes you. You become nourished from the inside out, not the external. You're no longer seeking external circumstances and things and addictions to nourish you. You are now becoming nourished from the inside out, moment to moment, breath by breath. And I'm not saying that all of a sudden your life is going to be this picture perfect, gold filtered Instagram post all the time. No, of course, not at all, Of course not. But you will become nourished in ways that you may think right now are not necessarily real, right? The true nourishment of the soul is what is experienced when the true sexual force begins to awaken. And I think with this, my friends, I will wrap it up. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. I know I definitely did. I would love to go deeper into it. Keep your eyes out. I have a really exciting conversation coming to you, getting deeper into all of this. Okay, until next time, send you so many wishes and Hawaii blessings. See you next time. Mwah.